Hello and welcome to a special interview for The Wire. Isn't it amazing how 24 hours can change a country? And that's precisely what's happened in Pakistan. Yesterday was tense, the air was full of rumor and speculation. This morning we have a new dawn. Tomorrow the country will have a new prime minister. Joining me live from Lahore to talk about the 24 hours that have changed his country is Pakistan's foremost journalist, the editor in chief of the Friday Times, and the former caretaker chief minister of Pakistan's Punjab province, Najam Sethi. Najam Sethi, let's start with yesterday. How tense, how difficult was yesterday? I noticed that the assembly session began at 10:30 in the morning, but the voting didn't happen until after midnight. On four separate occasions, the assembly was adjourned, and there was constant speculation that Imran Khan or his PTI might have a trick to scupper the vote. So, how difficult a day was yesterday?
It was an impossible day, Karan. I've never seen anything like it. For nearly 10 hours, we were on tenterhooks. We had no idea, a lot of people, about what was going to happen. Even the members of parliament, I think, were clueless about where it would end and how far it would go. And the focus kept shifting from parliament to the prime minister's house. And believe you me, I think if somebody were to write a script about Pakistani politics and the sort of conspiracies and machinations that take place here, he would outdo Netflix. And so, really, it was a terrible day, but in the end, it worked out in favor of democracy, shall we say. And so, we are very delighted and pleased that we were able to overcome that particular hurdle when a sitting prime minister defied all constitutional odds and tried to put a stop to his impending ouster via democratic method. We
Something
can discuss that in due course.
Something the world noticed was that around midnight, both the Chief Justice of the country and the Chief Justice of the Lahore High Court ordered their respective courts to be open. Police vehicles and vans were seen within the vicinity of the National Assembly, and there was a lot of speculation that perhaps the army chief might be denotified. So let me ask, how close did this crisis come to actually spiraling out of control?
Tough question, but let me first say that the Inter-Services Public Relations Department, which is the spokesman of the Pakistan Army, has officially denied a BBC story that said that Imran Khan was about to sign a notification denotifying the Chief of Army Staff, and that this was about to happen at nearly around 10:30 p.m. last night. So that has been denied, that there was no such thing. And later, when this story began to do the rounds, the media was informed via the usual means that Imran Khan had said no such thing or had not tried to do any such thing. And those were PTI sources, Imran Khan's party sources. And at the same time, the military information sources were also saying that there was no attempt to do this, and so the whole story is baseless. And subsequently, of course, it's been denied. Having said that, there was certainly something going on. What I can give you the facts on that. The fact is that around 9:30, 10-ish, we heard the news that a petition had been moved by a citizen in the Islamabad High Court, asking the Islamabad High Court to step in and stop Imran Khan from issuing such a notification. Um, and that what that may have been one of the reasons why the Chief Justice of the Islamabad High Court was compelled to open the doors of the Islamabad High Court by 10 p.m. So the suspicion was that this had happened. That's where the story started from. And then we took a look at the petition, and it was both undated and unsigned, and which meant that it was just a draft. There was no actual data in it. So that took the media back to asking the question, why was such a petition moved if there was no threat of something like this happening and no attempt to challenge it in the event that it did? So that question remained unanswered. In the end, there was no such notification, and no such petition was looked up or was examined or accepted by the Lahore High Court. Similarly, the Supreme Court ordered all its doors to be opened at 12. Now, that the reason for that was absolutely clear, that 12 midnight was the cutoff date for the vote of no confidence to go through as per the original Supreme Court's order. And so, therefore, clearly, in the event that Imran Khan and his speaker and his deputy speaker defied the Supreme Court's order, and the Supreme Court would then be asked to step in and issue contempt notices and sweep them aside and order the secretarial staff or the secretary of the assembly to take charge and to continue with the voting, which is why we also heard that the secretaries of the staff, of the assembly, were asked to be on standby. So all this was going on, and as all this was going on, the Prime Minister was holding cabinet meetings, and the Speaker and the Deputy Speaker were rushing from the Assembly to the Prime Minister's house. And then we saw that around 10:30, we thought we saw all a cavalcade of cars exiting the Prime Minister's house. Normally, when this happens, ministers stop by at the gate to answer questions of the media that is sort of crowded around the entrance gate. But this time, nobody stopped, they just went by. So the media commentary was that things are not good. If they'd been okay, these guys would have stopped and given us some interviews and some sound bites. But that didn't happen. So the speculation began that the cabinet meeting had not ended in any positive news for Imran Khan, and people were scurrying home or to the assembly or wherever without giving any positive spin to what had transpired. So all this was going on, and then, of course, we saw the Speaker of the Assembly going to the Prime Minister's house. We saw him leaving the Prime Minister's house. We saw him being recalled back to the Prime Minister's house. And so then there was speculation about what the Speaker had been ordered to do. And then finally we heard the news that the Speaker had been ordered to resign from the speakership rather than refuse to pass the vote or pass the vote. And so when the Speaker arrived in the Assembly after his meeting with the Prime Minister, the media asked the Speaker some tough questions and in return got a hail of abuse. So you could sense that things were really rough out there, and so on. And so therefore, at nearly 15 minutes to 12, it looked as though all forces, as it were on standby in the event that something went wrong. But it seems that they were able to manage, as it were, the transition. The Speaker came to his chair and announced that he was going to be loyal to Imran Khan, and that he would not, in all conscience, he would be loyal to his party head, and he'd been ordered not to conduct the session. So he was resigning, and I think the Deputy Speaker had already put in his resignation. But he could have just got up and walked out, but he didn't. What he did was he invited the ex-Speaker of the National Assembly, who belongs to the Muslim League, Nawaz, Ayaz Sadiq, to come and take the chair, and gracefully handed over the chair to the new Speaker to be. And then the new Speaker said, "We will continue with we are sorry to see you go, but we will now continue with the session." And at 2 minutes to 12, after all the preliminaries had been taken care of, he called for a voting. But since the voting takes at least 20, 30 minutes, because it's done in a particular manner, he then had to end the session at 12 midnight as per the rule, and then take a break of 2 minutes and then come back the next day. The session continued, and then the voting was done, and it was taken, and 174 votes were counted in favor of the resolution, and thereby Imran Khan's lost his position as the leader of the House. However, until a new leader of the House is elected tomorrow, he will remain in the chair, and it's only after the new leader of the House has been elected by a majority vote, then the file will go up to the President of Pakistan, who happens to be a PTI loyalist. And we are now on edge to know what was going to happen on the day that the new leader of the House is elected, because again we'll go there now after this.
Just a moment. You're saying something very important. You're hinting or suggesting that even after Mr. Nawaz Sharif is elected tomorrow as the new leader of the House, and his name,
Shahbaz Sharif.
I beg pardon, Shehbaz Sharif is elected as the new leader of the House, and his name goes up to the president to appoint him and swear him in as prime minister, there could be an impediment or hurdle at the president's level.
I think there's going to be a hurdle even before that. The PTI has just announced an hour ago that they are putting up a candidate, the ex-foreign minister, Shah Mahmood Qureshi, from the PTI, as their candidate to replace Imran Khan. And of course, the opposition has nominated Shahbaz Sharif, and both nominations have been accepted by the new speaker. So there is going to be an election. But here's the problem. The problem is that the PTI has also said that they intend to challenge the acceptance of the papers of Shahbaz Sharif on some ground or the other. And if the speaker rejects their objections, then they intend to resign en masse from the parliament. Now, if this threat is carried out, and they mean to carry out this threat, that means that before the election takes place, they will walk out, having submitted their resignations to the new speaker, and then Shahbaz Sharif will be elected in due course. But then you will have a parliament without an opposition, and and then, as you say, there's every likelihood that once that the speaker sends the requisition to the presidency to call Shahbaz Sharif to be sworn in as prime minister, he will not be prime minister until he's sworn in. The president can do all manner of things, like Imran Khan tried to do. The president can also thwart that, or the president can be suitably persuaded, shall we say, like Imran was suitably persuaded in the final analysis, to step aside or to not create any further problems at risk of being held in contempt of court and being put into prison. The president also will be, maybe, or should be, or will be persuaded not to create any fresh hurdles. But of course, he can simply resign and create another void. If he resigns, then what happens is that the process is delayed, because then the Speaker of the Senate, who is second in line, becomes the acting president. And the Speaker of the Senate will then sit and swear Shahbaz Sharif in. The Speaker of the Senate belongs to the establishment and will do exactly as the establishment says. He was a compromise candidate and doesn't belong to Nawaz Sharif's party or the People's Party.
I'll just clarify for the Indian audience that when you say establishment, you mean the military. It's the polite euphemism used in Pakistan.
Yes, he hails from Balochistan, and the military establishment has a very big say in what happens in the parliament of
But what you're
Balochistan.
saying, Najam Sethi, is that the bag of tricks that we saw Imran Khan playing with over the last few days is not exhausted. There could be more tomorrow at the level of the challenge to the Shahbaz Sharif nomination, and there could be further at the level of the president. And therefore, this matter could go back to the courts in many ways, and there could be a lot of delays and uncertainty. In other words, the new dawn that I talked about in my introduction could be still several hours away. Darkness could be continuing for a few more hours.
Imran Khan has made it absolutely clear that he has no intention whatsoever to let the new government stay in office, and that he means to destabilize it. He said it as a matter of policy, that he doesn't accept what's happened, and he will not let the government be stable or survive, and he will do everything in his power to disrupt it. So that would suggest that it will start tomorrow on the election of the new prime minister or leader of the House. Then obstacles in the way of his swearing in. And then finally, even when he does become prime minister, a parliament that is shorn of nearly 130 or 140 or over 100 members of PTI. They were 155. They are now down to about 100 because the rest have all departed or defected. And so there will be, then what happens? Then what happens is that when they resign, the speaker has to accept their resignations. And as long as he doesn't accept their resignations, they technically remain members of parliament. On one occasion in the past, about 5 years ago, Imran Khan had about 30-40 seats, and he tendered his resignations to the speaker. The speaker didn't accept them. and they were kept pending for like 2 or 3 months, and then Imran Khan was persuaded to come back to the assembly. It's up to the speaker. If the speaker says no, I will not accept these for whatever reasons, they do not stand resigned. On the other hand, they can still refuse to come to parliament. So you might have a parliament which is barely past the majority figure, and there's no opposition. So that would
But the
suggest that
interesting thing you're saying is that just as there are tricks that can be played by questioning Shehbaz Sharif's nomination, and the president can play tricks by not swearing him in or delaying it, there's also one weapon in the hands of the new speaker, who is a PMLN man. He was the person who presided over the last moments of the assembly in the early hours of this morning. He may refuse to accept the resignations, and that can also work towards scuppering at least one of Imran Khan's gimmicks.
yes and no. Yes, he can hold on to the resignations, but what's the point if they refuse to attend the assembly? So, in a psychological sense, Imran would have made a point about not accepting the new government or the new prime minister, and refusing to attend the assembly,
Okay.
and trying to raise street protests and so on and so forth, which is threatened to do. Uh, but then it will get a little nasty, I think. Right now, Shahbaz Sharif has made a public statement, in Parliament actually, in which he said, "We do not intend to be vindictive, and we do not intend to to settle old scores. Let's try and put a national government together, and let's try and solve our problems." But Imran has burned the olive branch. What he said is absolutely the opposite of that. He says, regardless of what you do or you don't do, I am not going to let you off the hook. I'm going to try and dethrone you, and I'm going to try and create problems. Now, in that case, I expect then that the government of the day will come down on Imran and his party people with a heavy hand. Um, Two things will happen. If they try to disrupt the proceedings, the government will have enough material on many of them to immediately put them behind bars. We're now beginning to see stories coming out about the corruption of many of including Imran Khan, of many of his rightist right hands.
Did you say including Imran Khan? There are stories about alleged corruption by Imran Khan himself.
Yes, that's right. They will be coming out soon, and there will be no small matter. There will be pretty big things, either in terms of conniving or in terms of shirking responsibility for certain large-scale embezzlements and so on and so forth. And then, of course, his relatives, his sister and his wife, and so on and so forth. All that is going to come out. The shit is going to hit the ceiling, and so therefore, pardon the expression. Therefore, we are in for a rough time in terms of confrontation and the rest of it.
So, in other words, the new dawn may be delayed by several hours, several days, and even after that, there could be a lot of stormy weather as the two sides square up with each other and try and play games with each other to undermine each other. So, the future doesn't look settled, it doesn't look certain. There is a prospect of change, but it's not going to be easy to achieve.
Yeah, I think there are going to be hiccups, and I think there are going to be stormy sessions. And I think the whole purpose of this regime change, as far as the military establishment is concerned, is to get a good governance and power, government and power, get some stability and continuity going, carry out some reforms in the economic and legal fields, and get back into productive conversations with the international community, all of
Okay.
which was lacking sadly during Imran Khan's time. But if Imran Khan is determined to create instability, then I think the government will hit back, and will have to put a lot of people behind bars. Then there will be a lot of toing and froing to the courts and so on. And once again, the judiciary will get embroiled in political trials, which it has tried to avoid in the last 2 or 3 years, which is why many of the cases that Imran Khan's government initiated against leading opposition figures did not bear fruit for him, because due process, if you follow due process, the sort of evidence that is required to convict people on corruption charges is not easy to come by.
Okay.
And so, therefore, Imran Khan will also have to face now the same sort of reaction from a sitting government. At that time, the establishment was on his side. This time, the establishment will not be on his side. It may not be on the side of the new government, but it won't be on his side. And so, I think Pakistan is not yet out of the woods.
Absolutely. But let's talk at this point about two or three of the characters that we are bound to hear and see a lot more of. To us in India, they are not well known. Maybe you can help tell us something about them. The first is Shehbaz Sharif, who we all believe will be Prime Minister possibly tomorrow. We know his elder brother Nawaz Sharif, who was thrice Prime Minister of Pakistan, but all we know about Shehbaz Sharif is that A, he's a good administrator, and B, he's had three tenures as Chief Minister of Punjab. What more can you tell us in India about the man who is likely to be the new Prime Minister?
A couple of things. Number one, as you pointed out, he's been chief minister for a very long time of Punjab. Punjab is over half of Pakistan, and actually it's the heartthrob of Pakistan. So running Punjab is no easy matter. I was chief minister for 3 months, and I can tell you that it's like running a country. That's how tough it is. And two, he acquitted himself well. There were few charges of corruption slapped on his regime, whereas as an administrator and somebody who used to said to get up at 6 a.m. in the morning and work till 12 at night, a doer. That was his reputation. The international community loved him. The international aid organizations would come pocketfuls of cash and want to give it to the Punjab government for development and so on and so forth. Something they didn't like doing to the other provinces because they thought the administrators there were corrupt and inefficient or incompetent. So he has a very good rapport in terms of running a government, but only as an administrator. The politics of Jod Tod and the politics of alliances and scratching the backs of your constituents and so on, he had left that to his son Hamza. So Hamza was running the local party where Shahbaz was running the province. Now, the only difference between running Punjab and Pakistan, there are two or three differences. So I don't think that will be difficult for Shahbaz to manage Pakistan. One is, of course, foreign policy. Provinces have nothing to do with foreign policy, defense, and related matters. So now he will have to contend with those matters as well, apart from wanting to run a good ship. But the other important thing is that many of the functions of the federal government, which used to be a strong outpost, but have been devolved to the provinces. So he will have his hands free, literally, to focus on major issues. And I think there's absolutely no doubt in anybody's mind that he'll do a good job, including in foreign policy and in domestic policy. And last of all, most important, he has never crossed swords with the establishment. Even in the worst of times, when his brother was adamant in demanding his own rights as a prime minister, 3 times elected prime minister, Shahbaz was the voice that cautioned him not to take on the establishment. Shahbaz was the voice that told him to compromise. My sense is that he's already made statements to that effect, that we will work jointly with the establishment to establish a good polity in Pakistan, blah, blah, blah. So I think those are the strong points he brings to the table, and I think that's one of the reasons why he's going to be prime minister.
What about keeping this coalition that's come together with the intention of defeating Imran? Now that they've achieved that purpose, will the glue that bound them still remain? Because it covers not just center left and center right parties, but it also covers religious parties. Is there a danger that if he doesn't have what you said, the skill of Jod Tod, he might not be able to keep this coalition together?
He needs to be able to do that till the next elections are called. Otherwise, the worst fears of the establishment and the media and the people of this country will come true. That this is a motley bunch of have-beens, and at least Imran was a good, solid, stable figure. At least he had charisma, and this lot is again doing the same thing, parceling out favors and not interested in government. So he has to look out for that. He has to accommodate his alliance partners, but he also has to run a good, solid, clean ship, and this is going to be one of his main challenges. Keeping them together, making sure they don't get up to tricks that hurt the coalition. And he will have to make concessions in at least 2 provinces, possibly even in the third. And so therefore, my argument has always been that he should not hang in there for too long. Nawaz Sharif himself has let it be known that he would like a quick election. He thinks that if this particular government of so many people, a sort of a national government without the true national manifestation of it, in terms of looking at the national interest rather than your own provincial interest, could unravel quickly. And if that happens, they will be discredited. So by the time the next election rolls around, 6 months from now or 9 months from now, Imran Khan might be coming back in terms of riding a wave of unhappiness with the current regime. So this next 6 months are going to be pretty critical in terms of how these issues are resolved, and also then what happens when elections are finally called.
Last night, I got the impression that another star on the Pakistan political firmament is Bilawal Bhutto. I noticed that many of the speeches made after the vote and Imran had been dispensed with actually went out of their way to praise Bilawal Bhutto. Has he now become a recognized, established politician in his own right, no longer seen as Benazir's young son?
Yes, he has. He's been very commendable. He keeps a smile on his face even when he's saying harsh things. He's very pleasant, very amiable, and he's very intelligent. And his commitment to his new role is demonstrated by the fact that in the last 3 years he's actually learned the Urdu language to be able to communicate. He spent most of his life outside Pakistan because Benazir was in exile when he was growing up. Then he went to Oxford, and again he was out of touch. So he hadn't spent too much time in Pakistan, and it was known also that his interest in politics was not particularly strong. But then, after her assassination, Zardari roped him in, and he then determined to stand by his father and actually be the inheritor. So he is the chairman of the party, and Zardari is the co-chairperson. And he's learned Urdu. I mean, it's remarkable. He's learned Urdu, although he does slip up from time to time, and the opposition pokes fun at him for from making grammatical errors and so on. He's unfazed by it. And he strikes everybody as a responsible, thinking person. And of course, he's very fluent in English. And he's able to get by now and say what he needs to say in Urdu. There is speculation that he may be offered the job of the foreign minister.
And that is credible speculation that he could be, at the young age of, 27, 26, the next foreign minister of Pakistan. Something only his grandfather achieved when Zulfikar Ali Bhutto became a very young, was it commerce minister in Ayub Khan's government?
I think he's now 30 plus, 32 or 33, which is fine. And he's had a lot of experience. I mean, 5 years of Pakistani politics just makes you a hard man. And he's seen it all, and he's been part of every policy decision. And he's now respected as an equal by people as old as Maulana Fazlur Rahman in their 70s, and other people in both in the camp and the opposition's camp. And so I think he'll be take to foreign policy like a fish to water. And by the way, his father has also established very good relations with the establishment. So I imagine the establishment has two main interests in Pakistan, which it guards jealously. One is that all strategic thinking and foreign policy should be approved by the establishment, especially in regards to America and India, number one, and Afghanistan now, of course. And number two, that they get sufficient funds to keep the army's requirements going, which means budgetary allocations as per the requirements. And I think neither Shehbaz Sharif nor Bilawal Bhutto will deny them their traditional, shall we say, perks and privileges and rights.
So he will not make the mistake his mother made in her early years as prime minister of looking as if she was trying to become an opposition force vis-a-vis the army. That mistake won't be made by the son.
No way. His father has taught him well.
Tell me, the third person who is, about whom at least there are question marks, must be your president. You've already suggested how he might play games, if I can use that colloquial phrase, with Shahbaz Sharif's nomination and may not swear him in immediately. How long will this new government want someone who's so loyal to Imran to continue as president?
I think within weeks they will start a process of impeachment. And there's no way they will let him sit in the presidency.
Within weeks, as soon as that? And finally, although you mentioned this and answered this in earlier interviews, I'll ask it again because it's a question my countrymen constantly ask. What about the next army chief? General Bajwa retires in November. Will it be difficult for Shehbaz to choose a successor? Might he be tempted to do what Nawaz did once, to choose a chosen loyalist and find that it backfires? Or will he go down the seniority principle, as you said, has become practice?
In the judiciary, the seniority principle has become practice. In the armed forces, the choice of the Army Chief, Air Force Chief, and Navy Chief is the prerogative of the Prime Minister. And on many occasions, the senior most has been bypassed and actually shunted upstairs to the position of Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff, which is basically a desk job, no real power. But still, it's a ceremonial sort of position. The Chairman Joint Chiefs of Staff does handle some issues, but not day-to-day army operations and decision making. So yes, I think General Bajwa, I think, will retire honorably in November, and I think the Shehbaz Sharif won't make the mistake of handpicking uh, people who are lining up with Safarish and so on and so forth. My understanding is that Nawaz Sharif will actually do the honors on that score, and my sense is he's not going to like people who send emissaries with the promises of good behavior and support from within the establishment. I think I have a feeling that they will not do that sort of thing again, and they will go by the book and make sure that the person they select doesn't create any ripples in the armed forces and doesn't thwart any ambitions which are legitimate in some way or the other. So, senior people expect to be appointed in senior positions. When you bypass them with people who are junior, there is a degree of resentment. Um, some people actually resign when they are bypassed. So my sense is, well, my expectation is, shall we say, that they won't make that same mistake, and they will go for somebody, a new chief, on which there is a consensus in the top echelons of the army that this is a good choice, and none of us has any heartburn over it.
My last question: how soon do you expect to see Nawaz Sharif back home?
Yes, well, I think the first thing that's going to happen is that Nawaz Sharif's passport, as you know, was taken away from him or expired and not renewed. So the first thing that's likely to happen is that the new government will order the Foreign Office to issue him a passport. And the argument will be very simple that, we want him to come back and face trial. He was an absconder, declared as an absconder because he didn't expect a fair trial. But now that the victimization process is over, NAB, which was prosecuting him, the National Accountability Bureau, will be reformed before that happens in the next month or two. And once the NAB has been defanged and some legitimate amendments made, I think Nawaz Sharif can expect to come back and face a trial. And my sense is that the evidence against him is so weak, mostly trumped up, that he and his daughter, Mariam, will be acquitted in due course. And Nawaz Sharif will be able to go back to politics. Although he may not be able to contest an election because his disqualification continues for 5 years. That's a separate case. But still, he can even have that reversed by filing appeals and so on. Because there is, a lot depends in this country. Nawaz Sharif was disqualified in 2000 by the Supreme Court from ever contesting elections. And then 8 years later, he came back and ordered a review of that judgment. Although a review is supposed to take place within 30 days of the judgment, he sought a review of the judgment that had condemned him, and the Supreme Court of that time accommodated him and said that judgment, we overthrow that judgment. So lots of things happen in this country depending on the political climate, the relationship with the establishment, and so on and so forth.
I thank you, Najam Sethi, for this interview, and I thank you in particular for opening the eyes of the people of India that there are still many problems and impediments that lie ahead. There's a lot of room for people to play tricks and games, if I can use that euphemism, and therefore, although there is a hint of light on the horizon, full sunlight could still be days away. I thank you for this interview. Take care. Stay safe.
Thank you.